What we got going on here? Well, I'm in the process of painting all these parts, even the backs of the rotors. You might think that's crazy. Why would anybody paint the backs of the rotors? Well, it's just they're off. It takes 5 minutes to paint them, and that'll maybe help prevent them from getting all rusty and scaly and crappy. So it doesn't take long. I'm going to paint the back sides and the front sides. Everything bare metal that I can reach, I'm going to paint. I'm just putting some high temperature engine primer on those because they get hot, and then some engine paint, silver engine paint. So hopefully they never have to end up looking like this. When installing ball joints, you should know that you should start with the lower ball joint first, and I'll show you why. This goes on like that, and this big clamp goes on like this, and then this screw thing can go through the top. Now I made this mistake when I did the other one. I put the top one in first, and I had a really hard time getting the lower one in. There just wasn't any good way to make it work, and I had to kind of improvise a tool and some plates and spacers and things to make it work. It was really a pain, and I sat there and looked at it, and by looking at it I realized, you know, if I would have done that in the opposite order, if I would have put the bottom one in first and put this shaft through up there, that'd be a really easy way to get the bottom one in, and then the top one can go in the reverse order. So just trust me, do it this way. Do the bottom one first with the shaft through the top hole, and then do the top one second. This one goes the exact same way. It's really easy to follow the order. If you do it in the wrong order, the bottom one is a real pain. You have to improvise. Look at that. You can grind that one second. Wow, that must be really strong. All right, so I'm working on rebuilding my outer shafts on the front axle here, the short ones. And I ordered these kits, 2 of them, from Off-Road Design. And the kit is a kit to rebuild all the seals on the outer axle. So if you look closely here, you've got the first seal right here, this little guy, and then a second seal right here, this plastic one. And the third seal is this big rubber one, and then you got a metal plate. So here's the 4 parts. Okay, next challenge. We got new bearings to go on these spindles. But how do you get that old bearing out? So I couldn't reach it with anything from the backside, not with a punch or with a bearing and seal puller. Wouldn't work, wouldn't pull on it. So what I did is I took a screwdriver and I just bent the tip of it over a little bit. So now I can put this in from behind and just barely catch. I can catch the back side of that bearing and pound it out from the other side. So I just work my way around with that bent tip to get behind it. So that's how I was able to knock that one out and do this one next. All right, take a look at this. You can get your old bearings out. That one doesn't even turn. This one turns. So that one's pretty good shape. This one's pretty much seized up. I can't even move that one. And take a look at this. Brand new bearing. Barely moves at all. I got to really wrench on it. So don't just take these and throw them in. Pack them with grease and throw them in there. We got to put some carb cleaner in here. Soak that down a little bit. And then, now magically, all of a sudden they start turning. So I don't know what they put in these from the factory, but they're dead stiff. So I clean them out real well with carb cleaner, and then I try to kind of soak up all that carb cleaner, get that out of there, and then pack them with grease. But they should roll like that. They should roll nice and free before you install them. Okay, to pound the new bearing in. Just need something flat to take it that far. But you can't just pound it flush with the surface like that, because one of the seals, this one, has to ride down in that groove. So this has to go down in about that thickness. This seal shouldn't be flush either. The seal should stick up just a touch, but it needs to go down in that groove. So I need to find a socket that matches this so I can countersink that a little bit. I'm going to try and countersink that down just like maybe 1/8 of an inch. Yeah, about just like that. You can see how that stands just a little bit proud of the surface. That's what we want. All right, so to get this knuckle on here, you basically feed it in so that both ball joints go through. And then for the bottom one, you put a big pry bar in here, right there, and you pull really hard, and then you tighten this nut up to 70 foot-pounds. The reason for the pry bar is because without that, the shaft of the ball joint will just spin when you're trying to turn the nut. So by doing this, you pull real hard on this bar, and it puts a force against the side of the ball joint shaft and holds it in place so you can turn the nut. I didn't come up with that. Some other guy on YouTube showed that, but it worked great for me. So you crank that one down to 70 foot-pounds, and then this top one has a little adjuster sleeve. And you got to get this special tool or make one that goes on that sleeve, and then this one is kind of loose in there until you tighten that adjusting sleeve down in, and then it'll snug up that shaft. And this one, I've seen people report that it's supposed to be either 50 pounds or 70 pounds on the adjusting sleeve. So I think I'll just start at 50. If it doesn't feel tight, maybe go up to 60, maybe 70, somewhere in that range. I'm just going to keep turning it until it feels tight. So I'm going to set my torque wrench to 50. See how that feels. It's still going down in there. There's 50. So I think people say the book says 50, but some of the ball joint manufacturers' instructions say 70. But I don't know. Oh boy, that's really stiff. I'm not going to go any tighter than that. I might even have to back that out a little bit. That's pretty stiff there. I'm not sure it's supposed to be quite that stiff. I'm going to back it out just a touch, see if it gets any better. A little better. I think I'm going to leave it right there. Okay. Then the big castle nut that goes on top of here, that's 100 foot-pounds. Torque that one to 100 foot-pounds, put the pin in, and we're done. All right. Taking a look down in this axle. You can see it's pretty dirty in there. It's not greasy or oily, so that means that seal that's way up in there is still good. But I need to try and sweep some of that dirt and grime out of there so that when I slide the axle back in, it doesn't push any of that into the differential. So my idea for that is I put a paper towel on a long pole here, and I'm going to kind of shove that up in there and then see if I can sweep some of that dirt out. So that's my idea anyway. Let's see how we do. Okay, here we go. Okay, I think that's it. Feels like it's seated in the differential, so I think we're good. New bearing is in and greased up, and the shaft is greased up. So we're going to carefully try and get this guy on here. Oops. Okay, that's that. Okay, in order to get this new hub assembly on the truck, I got this kit from Off-Road Design. It comes with a bunch of parts. Here's all the parts it comes with. It comes with new bearing races. There's a race for that one, and a race for this one, and then a seal for the back. And the races, you might wonder, I got new hubs, new hub assemblies. They already have bearing races in them, so that could work. But I've heard these are just kind of cheap Chinese bearing races, so it's better to knock them out and put the good quality Timken ones in. So I think that's what I'll do. Knock those Chinese ones out and put the Timkins in, and they also match the Timken bearings. So I'll get to work on that next. Got this cheap old bearing driver set from Harbor Freight. I don't think it costs much, but it sure is nice having all these different bearing drivers so you don't have to go hunting for sockets or something else to knock these out. Shouldn't be anything complicated about this really. You just want to find one of these things that kind of matches the size of the bearing race that's down in there. Seems like it fits that one pretty well. And then you just knock it out. That's it. There's the Chinese race, gone. So now I'll flip it over and knock this other bigger one out. So now for that larger race that's down in there, we got a little bit of a problem. That's a bigger race, and I need a pretty big bearing driver to push it out, but I got a small hole on the top here. So I can't fit this bearing driver through that hole to get on the back side of that bearing race. So that's not going to work for this one. So I'm going to have to try and get on the edge of that race with a punch and just kind of go around in a circle and see if I can tap it out this way. Okay, I got that other one out, so it should be easier to put the new ones in. Just got to find the right size driver here. Hopefully I have one that fits. See how it's got a taper, and this has a taper too, so oh yeah, look at that. That one should be perfect. So I can just set this down in there. Like that. Now I should be able to just drive that in. Okay, I hammered on it a few more times until it went all the way down in. Now you can see it seats right up against this flange here, right up against there. So that's down all the way. So now I'll do the same thing for this back one. This one's going to have to climb over. So these bearings ride inside your hub assembly, but what they would look like is this. This one goes back here. Can't quite get it on all the way right now. And this one goes like this. It rides in this sleeve here, so that's going to have to get kind of pressed on. But then the one with the little stud on it goes on like this. Okay, then you would crank that down. I think you crank it down to 50 foot-pounds while you're spinning the rotor. Then you back it off, and then you crank it to 35 foot-pounds while you're spinning the rotor, and that should seat those bearings where they're supposed to be. Then you back it off a little bit more, like 3/8, and lock it down right there. And your hub assembly should spin freely but not have any play. Okay, so let's say we've got this on, torqued up that way. Then we put our locking ring in, and there's the keyway to the spindle is right there, so this key goes right here. It doesn't match up with my pin, so I'll flip it over, and it does match up that way. Cool. Then the last one goes on. That holds the whole thing together. And this one we torque down to whatever foot-pounds. I guess I'll have to find a factory manual and see if I can find the correct torque spec for that. But that's how this goes together, so it's not complicated. It's pretty simple. All right, we're going to give this a try here. I spun the first nut in, and we're going to try and set that to 50 foot-pounds. I got the torque wrench set to 50. It says to set it to 50 while spinning it. I only have so many hands, so I'll have to spin it in between. Okay, that's 50. It's too tight, obviously. It's pretty tight. Now they say back it off. Back it off and retighten to 35. Okay. I'll set this thing to 35. Okay, that's 35. Still feels, I don't know, feels pretty good. But they say to back it off a bit from there too. So I'm gonna back it off. They say 3/8 of a turn. I don't know how much 3/8 of a turn is. I think 3/8. 4/8 would be a half. I'm just gonna loosen it up about that much. There. Now it spins pretty freely. There's no play in it. So I think that's right. That's where it needs to be. Alright, so our slot is up here and the locking pin is right there. So we're going to see if we can get this thing to line up with one of the holes. And that does not line up with the pin. It almost does. It's real close. I think if I back that off just a touch, it should line up. There we go. Pin is in. So now I can put the locking nut on. Okay, I've got the locking nut in. I've already torqued it to 50 and then to 100. And I'm going to go to 150. Alright, next up is the hubs. So I'm going to try and put these worn hubs in. Should be fairly straightforward. Hopefully there's no surprises here. Okay. That snap ring has to go in a groove right here. And if you can't see the groove like I can't, that means you need to push the axle out a little farther. Remember that axle's got new rubber seals on it on the back side. So those rubber seals might be working against us a little bit here. Okay. There. Next one is this ring. That holds the hub assembly in. So we'll just do this. Okay, good. Now the next thing they tell you to do in the instructions is screw a couple of these little screws in. This will be the one thing I'm not a big fan of on these worn hubs. These little screws are tiny. I think they could give us something a little more robust than that. Seems like you could break these with your fingers. So when we pull out, there's supposed to be a little bit of play in this thing. There's a few thousandths play in there, not much, but they just said it's not supposed to be tight. So think that seems fine. So let's put the cap on and see if it actually works. All right, so we're in free mode right now. So now if I try and put this in lock, okay. Ooh, yeah, I hear that axle moving. And if I put it back in free, there we go. We're free again. All right, so I got to torque these down to like 25 inch-pounds or something like that, they said. And then we'll move on to the other side. See that guy moving over there? It tells us we're locked in. And there we go. Now we're unlocked. That's going to wrap it up for this video. And the next one, we're going to go over the crossover steering.